Hi folks, how are we all doing? I'm the Reverend Danny Crosby, a Unitarian minister in the northwest of England, serving congregations in Altrincham and Urmston. I do hope you're finding the love and witnessing some of the blessings that are there in these difficult times. It is hard, my friends, but we are all in this one together. So I'm offering these devotions as my little bit of hope, I suppose, playing my role in being a part of the solution. They're a kind of balm, I suppose, for the heart, the mind, the spirit and the soul. And the title for today's reflection is The Aliveness of Things. So I invite us just to still ourselves in silence together now. Let's invite a loving presence to be here amongst us and to awaken from deep, deep within us. I have lit the flame of freedom in this cup of belonging, acceptance and love. So come and enter this time, this space, in the spirit of love. Know that you are welcome. Know that you are welcome whoever you are, wherever you have been, wherever you may well yet be, wherever you're going. Who knows? But know that you are welcome. Know that you are welcome as you are, exactly as you are in this time. And in this time may we be reminded of our highest aspirations and be inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of life. I invite you to come and awaken to the aliveness of things, the aliveness of our very being. We are alive. We are awake. We are here. Wonder at that just for a moment. The fact that you are alive at all. What were the odds? May we know that once again, that even in this time of physical separation, we are not isolated beings. We are beings who are connected in mystery and miracle, connected to the universe, connected to one another, connected to all that is life. Know that we are alive. Know the aliveness of things. So let's be alive and awake to the spirit of love within and the spirit of love without. The spirit of love that brings the aliveness to all things. Be at one. And I'm going to begin today's little devotion with a rather wonderful poem by the wonderful poet, sadly died, I think just over a year ago now, Mary Oliver. So this is Daisies by Mary Oliver. It is possible, I suppose, that sometime we will learn everything that there is to learn. What the world is, for example, and what it means. I think this as I am crossing from one field to another in summer, and the mocking bird is mocking me, as one who either knows enough already, or knows enough to be perfectly content not knowing. Song being born of quest, he knows this. He must turn silent were he suddenly assaulted with answers. Instead, hear his wild, caustic, tender warbling ceaselessly unanswered. At my feet, the white petalled daisies display the small suns of their centrepiece. There, if you don't mind my saying so, their hearts. Of course I could be wrong. Perhaps their hearts are pale and narrow and hidden in the roots. What do I know? But this. It is heaven itself to take what is given, to see what is plain, what the sun lights up willingly, for example. For example, I think this. As I reach down, not to pick, but merely to touch, the suitability of the field for the daisies and the daisies for the field. Oh, the aliveness of things. A few years ago, I had the honour of conducting the very first same-sex marriage in a religious building in the district of Travel. In fact, in the whole of Cheshire, as I discovered later. The ceremony was for two women who had been attending worship with us for a short while. It was a truly beautiful occasion, full of joy, full of love. At the end of the service, many of those present thanked me and told me how much they loved it. Some of the comments lived with me for quite some time, and one in particular I believe will keep me going for quite a long time now. I think it's kept me going a few years when I look back. I had a long and continuing conversation with one of the guests, but it was the first thing that he said that struck me powerfully. He said something like this: I gave up on religion 50 years ago, but something happened today. This service has awoken something in me. Thank you. He thanked me, but the reality is the thanks are all mine. One of the reasons I do this work is for moments like this. In many ways, it's why I am doing what I am doing. But isn't that why we're all here? To discover the truth that life is more than just the material processes of life. We are called, I believe, to help awaken one another to the aliveness of being, to raise one another's consciousness. And it seems, somehow, I did that day for that man. That's why I do what I do. It's why we all ought to do what we do, I think. I love the aliveness of things. I feel over the last few years of my life it's been all about awakening to the aliveness of things. This kind of universal consciousness, if you like, at the core of all life. What the Western religions probably call God. And I witness this aliveness in all life. I see it in human creativity too, particularly in the arts. I love the aliveness in words, in art, in music, in whatever is creative. We experience the works in the moment, of course we do, whether individually or collectively, and yet, especially in the great works, these things that are somehow timeless, these things that possess a consciousness of their own, as their aliveness is not only in the moment they're written or recorded or created, but they continue on and on into eternity as they touch generation after generation of people who touch so many others. If life has revealed anything to me, it has awoken me to the fact that things are much more than merely the sum of their parts, that they have a power beyond the mere limits of the material that they are formed from, that they grow in power and meaning beyond the limits of the Creator's imaginations. That aliveness, of course, was there before the creation grew in the Creator's imagination. It is vital to remember, of course, that all that occurred before those moments, that the creation was even began, all the incredible aliveness that allowed the creation to happen. Those wonderful works of art that happened in that small period of time and yet go on affecting and being alive way beyond that moment that they were created. Just think about that. The aliveness of that. What went into making the thing and what the thing affects beyond it being made. The aliveness of that, and it's seemingly an inanimate object. Really? I love the aliveness of things. I love the aliveness of mere thoughts and feelings, knowing that they come from something far more than the mere chemical reactions in my brain, or even my singular consciousness. I love the aliveness of things. They are so much more than the sum of their parts. So much more. And it's not just in the great works of art or human creation that I witness this same aliveness. I see it in the ordinary, in the loving interactions, in the small gesture of loving kindness. I see it manifest in the natural world. I see powerfully a simple, loving, universal consciousness at work in life. It enlivens and empowers me. It gives my life meaning and makes my life worth living for. Hey, maybe even dying for. Now, of course, there are many that would say I'm talking utter tosh, that would dispute my truth today. I probably would have done myself at one time or another. Who knows, I might do again in the future. Many suggest there is no such thing as consciousness, that it's merely a creation of the brain, a stage of the evolutionary process. Maybe they're right. What do you think? What do you think about consciousness? Is it merely a creation of the functions of the brain? Now, in philosophical circles, consciousness is considered what's called the hard problem, as it seems impossible for even the great philosophers, the great minds, to solve adequately. The great minds don't seem to have come up with a satisfactory answer to what exactly it is or why it exists. In fact, many of the great minds seem to fall out about it all the time. I'm sure that many would scoff at my seemingly unscientific conclusions about life. And yet, my ideas don't sound as crazy, I don't think, as some of the great theories of the great so-called great minds. Some have equated in recent times humanity as being nothing more than lumbering robots. Or asked why we are not just zombies. Or to quote that wonderful short story of science fiction, that we're not just simply, or we are just simply, meat that thinks. Meat that thinks. Oh, is that all we are? Not so sure about that. We are more than this. Surely we are. Reductionist worldviews seem to miss what is so clearly in front of its eyes. Now, but the truth is, of course, that maybe, just maybe, we'll never come up with a satisfactory answer as to what we call consciousness. Maybe one day we will. Maybe one day we'll know the answer to everything. I suppose it's possible. I suppose that one day we will know the answer to everything. And we should certainly strive for the answers. Our human consciousness, after all, the very thing that drives us, compels us to do so. Mine certainly does. But let's not forget to do what Mary Oliver suggests. Let's remember to pay attention to the beauty of the daisy and all life for that matter. For I believe that the same consciousness is at the heart of the daisy as it is to all of us, whatever colour and shape it may be, connecting all and bringing aliveness to everything. Now, I apologise if what I've rambled on about is a bit difficult to follow so far. It may get even more tricky now. So excuse me if this next bit's even harder to follow as I briefly attempt to summarise 3 schools of thought about consciousness. 3 schools that have emerged, certainly in the modern era, that is. The 3 being dualism, physicalism and panpsychism. You heard of all 3 of them? Maybe the first 2, the third one you may not have. So dualism first. Cartesian dualism, as it's called, dates back to the 17th century when René Descartes identified the problem that has tied the great minds in knots ever since. He realised that on one hand, that there was nothing more undeniably obvious than the fact that we are conscious beings. Everything else could be illusion, but not this, he said. As he said, I think, therefore I am. He suggested that this consciousness seemingly does not obey the usual rules of science of the physical realm, that is, as it can only be observed from within and can't really be described except from the one who is conscious of this consciousness. And from this he concluded that the mind therefore must be made from some special kind of non-material stuff that are not ruled by the laws of nature, and therefore they're bequeathed by God upon humanity, thus raising humanity above nature in some special way. But this dualism began to be questioned particularly by the secular scientific community that took physicalism, the idea that only physical things exist, as its primary principle. The problem was, though, that although it rejected dualism for many years, it could not come up with a convincing alternative to it. Such views concluded that the mind and consciousness are the result of processes of the brain. But no concrete answers beyond that could be unearthed. As a result, the topic became virtually taboo, actually, and was referred to as the hard question, which led in 1989 to Stuart Sutherland writing in the International Dictionary of Psychology that with regard to consciousness, it is impossible to specify what it is, what it does, or why it evolved. Nothing worth reading has been written on it. It's quite a strong statement. Nothing worth reading has been written on it. It's quite dismissive, that, I think. But there has been development since, most notably by Francis Crick and others who have suggested that certain neurons firing at particular frequencies are the cause of inner awareness. And there seems little doubt that there is a physical aspect to it, as awareness of who or what we are is affected by the workings of the brain. I can't argue with that. Brain injury and degenerative disease such as forms of dementia seem to prove this and certainly impact on our perception of consciousness. That said, just merely putting consciousness of ourselves and life itself down to impulses within the brain seems wholly inadequate as an answer to me. I am, I think, in the end with Sutherland on this. And of course there is also the problem of free will and potential to change. It seems that physicalism on the whole denies the possibility of either, claiming we are merely subject to our biological impulses. There is no free will. So, what does your experience say? So I'm not sure that's an answer, fully anyway. They either are. In more recent times, another theory has developed which is linked to some more ancient knowledge actually. The theory has become known as panpsychism, which suggests that everything, hence pan, in the universe might be conscious, or at least potentially conscious, or conscious when put into certain configurations. It suggests that consciousness is not merely limited to humans, thus rejecting any form of dualism and, of course, humanity's privileged position. Panpsychism does not require a belief in some special mind substance that resides in the brain, nor does it require the suspension in the belief of the laws of physics. Meanwhile, nor does it require us to deny the reality of our own experiences and the strange acceptance that consciousness does not exist at all when it's quite clearly it does. On the contrary, panpsychism suggests that consciousness is everywhere. Life is conscious, it's alive, life is throbbing with consciousness. Panpsychism suggests, in fact, that consciousness is the energy of all that is life. Panpsychism suggests that there is a connectiveness to everything and that everything affects everything else. It also suggests that consciousness does not actually require a brain at all, that consciousness exists beyond the brain. And I would suggest from this that actually the function of the brain is not to create consciousness, but to make sense of consciousness and to interpret and perhaps communicate this consciousness in the material aspects, in our material being. Isn't this what we do when we share our own personal experiences of life? Isn't this what words are for? Isn't this what creative expression actually is? And when we do so, do we not somehow increase the experience for ourselves and others? And do we not bring about change? Isn't that how change happens? The brain interpreting this consciousness, communicating with other beings. Now I'm sure some of you are thinking, what, you may have already turned off actually, so you won't hear this, but what is this guy going on about today? And what on earth has this got to do with the work that he does as a minister? And what's this got to do with what happened at that wedding the other week, a while ago? What has it got to do with the power of great works of art and loving action, etc.? Well, I believe it's got everything to do with it. And I often say I believe that everything matters. Every thought, every word, every deed, every single interaction is interconnected and impacts on everything and anything else. It seems to me that consciousness is everywhere, that life is throbbing with consciousness. And that the purpose of religion and spirituality, of course, is to awaken us to this conscious, for us to be conscious of our consciousness, if you like. And if we do, we might just be able to live by the values that we aspire to live by that golden rule of compassion, to do unto others as we would have them do to us. How could we not, as we are all connected by that same consciousness? We're part of it. We have the same blood flowing through us, and we have the same spirit animating this physical being. We're all a part of the aliveness of everything. So as we awaken to this consciousness, we can begin to act on it and incarnate this aliveness in our lives. We're a part of it. We're not separate. We're a part of it. It needs us and we need it. So my message today, I suppose, is awaken to the aliveness of it all. The great miracle of life is that we exist at all and that we're conscious of the fact that we exist. But I'm not sure we always appreciate this. Well, I suggest that we do. Let's appreciate the very fact that we're alive, that we're part of the aliveness of things. And go live our lives. Become a part, fully a part, awake and alive and fully conscious to the aliveness of all this, to the aliveness of everything. What a blessing, what a gift just to be. Just to be. So go be. I'm going to end today's meanderings, hope it made some sense, with some final words of blessing. Because if I know anything, I know that we don't bless enough. We need to bless more. Everyone can bless with their loving presence. Why not try offering blessings, being blessings throughout this day? So let's be still one final time. Many days we share life together and flower and flow with all that is and was and ever shall be. So let's bless our life, all life, through our thoughts, words and deeds, and it will bless us in return. And may the love of God go with us in all that we feel, in all that we think, in all that we say, in all that we do. Let's be alive, let's be fully embraced and engaged in the aliveness of things. Amen.